Last month, my wife and I visited Japan, and something about this trip surprised me. The experience taught me not only a lot about Japan, but in doing so, I felt like I also learned more about the region where we live, Southeast Asia. Allow me to explain. To the average American, Asia seems like a distant and mysterious land that they have no direct attachment to. We hear a lot about Asian culture, which is a pretty weird thing to talk about when you consider that Asia consists of 48 countries and nearly 5 billion people. Quite often, I get comments on my channel along the lines of, is this Asian country like this other Asian country? Well, I hope to answer some of those questions today as I compare and contrast Japan with Southeast Asia, two regions of the world that we hear about a lot but might not fully understand the differences of. So enjoy this footage from our vacation in Japan as I explain these big differences. Now, the people of Japan and Southeast Asia are both nice and good-hearted, but they're nice in different ways. Southeast Asia and Thailand in particular is often called the land of the smiles. The people there are warm and friendly. The Japanese people I would describe as being polite, respectful, but more introverted as a whole. The businesses pride themselves on providing you with good service, but the business owner isn't going to ask about you or your life. Whereas throughout my time in Southeast Asia, people always seemed more interested in getting to know you as a person. A restaurant owner in Cambodia will often ask you where you're from or what you do for a living, whereas Japanese culture is a bit more fast-paced. Everything is strictly business for them. Japanese people are helpful though. They're happy to take a photo for you or help you find where you're going, assuming that they can understand you. But most Japanese people can't speak more than a few words of English, which really is a stark contrast to Southeast Asia, where the waiters, the bank tellers, and the drivers all speak enough English to have a decent conversation with you. Much like America, Japan is a wealthy and self-sufficient nation, so the people do not really need to know any foreign languages in order to be successful in their job. This is in contrast to developing countries like Cambodia, Thailand, and Vietnam, which rely a lot on tourism and foreign investment, so English and to some extent Chinese are both commonly spoken here. The culture in Southeast Asia is just more social and diverse than the culture of Japan. If I were to live in Japan, I feel like it would be substantially more difficult to make friends or get involved in the dating scene, although I'm already married at this point. There's just more of a language barrier and a social barrier. Even though I'm not much of a raw seafood enjoyer, I actually really loved the food in Japan. I would say that it's better than Khmer food and probably even Thai food. However, there's a catch. Like I've already described, Japan's culture is quite monolithic. There are 1,000 places to get noodles, which I love, tons of places to get a nice and affordable Wagyu steak, which is considered some of the best steak in the world. But as soon as you get tired of that and say, okay, tonight I want a pizza, you run into problems. Whether your favorite Western food is tacos, pizza, or a hamburger, you're going to have trouble finding anything like that in Japan that's authentic. Yes, they have McDonald's and KFC, but your options don't go too far beyond that. What I really like about the food in a city like Siem Reap, it's not so much the Khmer food, it's the plethora of authentic Italian restaurants, French restaurants, burger restaurants, Indian restaurants, and so on. And when I go to Phnom Penh, I always get Chinese food because they have a thriving Chinese community there with authentic dishes. So overall, eating Wagyu steaks, ramen noodles, and Japanese curry over and over again was great for a couple of weeks, but I'm not sure if I could do that all the time. One area where Japan is completely unrivaled, though, is in their transportation and infrastructure. Here's something that absolutely blew my mind. When our plane landed in Tokyo, our bags were at baggage claim ready to be picked up by us before we had even finished walking there. Whereas I've had plenty of experiences in American airports where I've had to wait more than an hour to get my bags from baggage claim. The efficiency culture of Japan is really great as a tourist. The public transportation is also amazing. The trains are highly convenient and they are always on time. Of course, at first, it's a bit daunting to figure out how the system works, but once you understand all the different lines, you really come to appreciate it. And because of how bad traffic tends to get in the big cities like Tokyo, public transportation is usually just the fastest option to get to wherever you need to go. In Siem Reap, I don't need a car because the city is small and walkable, but in Tokyo, you don't need a car because it's just an inferior option to the trains. I know that in America, public transportation hasn't really delivered the results that its supporters were hoping for, but Japan really has it figured out. There's no petty crime or mentally ill people filling the subways. It's just a good system that the average person gets a lot of value from. Overall, Japan was a great place to visit, and my wife and I greatly enjoyed the trip, but it's not somewhere that I think would be viable to actually live and settle down in. Getting a long-term visa without an employer sponsoring you is quite difficult, although I think there is some possibility of that changing in the future. Definitely a good place for tourists to visit though. You're never going to run out of things to do. My favorite places that we visited were Kyoto and Hiroshima. Very beautiful cities where you can really get to see the history and culture of this great nation. My wife's favorite was the day that we went to Universal Studios in Osaka, as she'd never been to a theme park before. We're definitely going to travel around and experience more of Asia in the future, but which country do you think I should visit next? Let me know in the comments down below.